Hi everybody, today we're going to read Grandma's Gift by Eric Velasquez. Feliz Navidad, Eric. My teacher walked me to the classroom door, where my grandmother was waiting to take me back to her apartment for my winter break. I used to spend all my school vacations with her, so she could take care of me while my parents worked. Before we left, my teacher handed Grandma a note about our holiday project. The Metropolitan Museum of Art had just bought a famous painting, and I had to go see it and write a report. On our way home, Grandma asked me to translate the note because she couldn't read. I translate a lot of things for Grandma. Sometimes I felt like I was going to school for two. All the note said was Metropolitan Museum of Art, 82 2nd Street and 5th Avenue, 2nd floor, new exhibit. But for now, I had 10 whole days of freedom. And Christmas time in El Barrio was always like magic. Everyone was out in the streets, shopping for food and gifts. My grandma was ready to join them, so we dropped off my suitcase and headed straight to La Marquita, the market, one of my favorite places. This special group of shops and stalls sat under the elevated train tracks, and the stalls rumbled and shook whenever a train passed overhead. Grandma could find everything she needed there year-round: fruits, vegetables, fish, meat, clothing, and even her favorite records. But that day, Grandma was shopping only for ingredients for pastels, the traditional Christmas dish for Puerto Ricans. She promised that if I helped her make the pastels this year, she would take me to the museum. Our first stop was the produce stand to buy the root vegetables. I'm looking for pumpkins, taro root, green plantains, green bananas, and potatoes. Well, here are the best. All the vendors knew that Grandma would buy only the best ingredients for her famous pastels. When they agreed on the price, gracias, why, Feliz Navidad. Thank you and Merry Christmas. Here she is buying some root vegetables. Our next stop was the butcher stand. Which piece do you like, Miss Carmen? Alberto asked. That one is good. Give me 4 pounds. After that, our last stop was Doña Jusanita Bodega for parchment wrapping paper, banana leaves, string, and El Barrio's latest gossip. The worst part of the trip was carrying the heavy shopping bags up 5 flights of stairs to Grandma's apartment. As soon as she took off her coat, Grandma headed straight to the kitchen and went right to work, peeling and grating the root vegetables by hand, never with a blender. If you want it to taste traditional, you must make it traditionally, she always said. When I asked her where she learned to grate so fast, she only answered, "You should have seen my mother grate." While she worked, Grandma asked me to choose some records to set the mood. Siempre me gusta tu selección. I always like your selection. As Grandma put the meat onto simmer, she told me stories about her life in Sanchez, Puerto Rico, but she really had to concentrate when it came to wrapping the pastels, the hardest part of the recipe. First, Grandma carefully laid out a sheet of parchment paper with a piece of banana leaf on top. Then she poured a little annatto oil on the leaf and added la masa, the dough, and the meat, with the valley scooped out in the middle for la salsa, the sauce. For the finishing touch, she folded everything together to form a perfect rectangle and tied each one with string so it looked like an old-fashioned parcel. While the pastels were boiling for an hour, Grandma said, "These pastels are going to be the best ever because I am making them just for you." But I knew that I'd have to share them with the rest of the family and friends who came to visit. She also always handed them out to her favorite vendors as she shopped for all her gifts. The Tuesday morning before Christmas, Grandma woke up and announced that we were going to the museum so I could write my report before all the toys I would get for the holiday distracted me. Grandma never really traveled beyond the 20 blocks that made up El Barrio, where she knew everyone and everyone knew her. I could tell she was nervous, but I couldn't help being excited. The museum was a short ride down Fifth Avenue, but the neighborhood was completely different. When we got off the bus, right in front of the museum, we didn't see anyone from Puerto Rico on the streets, and no one was speaking Spanish. Suddenly, Grandma turned and said, "Hey, June de Pereja, what are you doing here?" Grandma finally recognized someone from El Barrio, but she was talking to a painting, and it was the most magnificent of all of them. I quickly ran up and read the caption next to it. "Grandma," it says, "June de Pereja was a slave and an assistant to the great painter Diego Velázquez. He later set de Pereja free, and de Pereja became a great artist himself." We both stood there, just staring at the amazing painting. The gentleman seemed to be looking back at us. He seemed so real, much like someone we might see walking around El Barrio. I couldn't believe that this was a painting in a museum. That evening, my parents brought rice with pigeon peas and roast pork to have with Grandma's delicious pastels for our Christmas Eve dinner. While we ate, Grandma and I told them all about our museum adventure. Grandma explained, "Aguinaldo Grandma explained that she had learned about June de Paraja when she was growing up in Puerto Rico. We all told stories and listened to music until midnight, when Grandma brought out a gift for me. I ripped off the wrapping paper to find my very own sketchbook and my first set of colored pencils. As we listened to Portakeen, my favorite Christmas carol, I took out my pencil and began to draw myself my first self-portrait. The end. I hope you like this book. Please subscribe and like. Bye.